Hello everyone, it recently came to my attention that I hadn't released the more updated version of the ASCA Spaceplane to my GitHub. It is now there, it is version 1.1, and it introduces many features including the cockpit, which is highly detailed. For those who don't know about the ASCA Spaceplane, there are multiple versions of it, and the original was the Scramjet Aerospike, or Scramspike. And that version doesn't have this bottom, it has instead a scramjet. And so we see a Scramspike scramjet, and you get all these parts by typing in ASCA, or you can also type in Scramspike. But the Scramspike won't include the boosters, because the boosters are for the boosters are for the Spaceplane only, no scramjet version of the Spaceplane. Now this version doesn't include the slots for the landing gear. The landing gear was only meant for the ASCA B version, which is the version that doesn't have the scramjet. So you'll have to put your own landing gear on here. So we have a scramjet there, and we have aerospikes. That's why it's a scramspike. And like this, it would be able to get into orbit on its own if you have the right fuel mixture. The best thing to do is not to have this body, which is RA cargo. RA cargo is heavier and really needs the boosters. If you want to get into orbit without having the boosters, then you're going to need this Scramspike SSTO, regular style. So this regular style one is lighter, 307 tons, but it doesn't have a cargo bay. It just carries crew up. This one does have a cargo bay. So what we do is, the cargo bay actually is a drop-down one. So you can see the gap there, and actually right now it has a laser in there too. There is a laser feature. This is the laser. It doesn't really fire a laser right now. I'll have to figure out how to do that with BD Armory. So for the version that uses boosters, we have either one of this ISRU conversion or this ISRU conversion. It really shouldn't be called ISRU conversion for both. This ISRU conversion has the ISRU. This only has the landing engines, no ISRU, so I really should rename that. This does have the slots for the landing gear, so landing gear part there, but the wheels don't turn, so don't try to take off with it. Okay, landing doors open, and then you have these landing engines. They're only meant for the moon and Mars, and we have the ISRU units. So that's all built in. It's got converters, convert ore to hydrolox, convert ore to methane is how you can do it. So this version doesn't have the scramjet, so it needs to just have boosters plus the aerospikes, but that makes it somewhat lighter so that I can carry that equipment in there. And if you get the version that this version that is, you can tell these two apart by which one's lighter. This one is lighter because it doesn't include the ISRU unit, and it also doesn't include the radiation shielding for the reactor that powers the ISRU unit. So going through all the parts here, we have a 3-segment booster for the booster required version that doesn't have the scramjet, the landing gear. This one is just if you don't want anything else inside. So if we open the landing doors, there's no engines, there's no ISRU. So this is the lightest version. It'll have the landing gear. And this also has a cargo ramp. So the cargo bay opens like this with a ramp. I decided on that so that the Kerbals could just walk in and out. And there's a ladder in the back, so they should clamber up the ladder and then hopefully get onto those stairs. Well, it's a ramp up, and then they can walk into the spaceplane like that. So they've got an airlock there, that's an airlock, and then they can get inside. It's a bit complicated. This is the most complicated spaceplane ever made for Kerbal Space Program. I've included the manual. In the download that I'll have in the video description, there is a manual for this, and it's a more than 60-page manual. So it's admittedly complicated, and you'll have to figure it out. We do have an array of jet engines as well, like that. So you can have those. These are jet ramjets that can get you to Mach 5 so that the scramjet, if you have it fitted, can work. And then otherwise, these are the places where you would mount the SRBs. So, and there's sort of a nozzle-only version of the jet if you wanted to use that for some reason. And I don't know why the exo launch wing pops up. There, we have the body flap there. It's a little bit awkward. And the aerospike engine, the vertical stabilizers, and all that business. So the way it looks in launch configuration, especially if you're using the ISRU version, you can't launch it like this. It has to be launched vertically. I'm not including the pad that I use, but otherwise this is how it is in launch configuration. We've got the booster nose cones, the booster, and then the booster skirt. Otherwise it's on regular decouplers right now. And that is basically it. And otherwise all sorts of functionality, the cargo ramp, the landing doors, and also the comms units. So communications is like that. Oh, I didn't notice that ladder went with the communications unit. Huh, I'll have to fix that. Sorry about that. And then the top hatch. If it docks to something, that's where they dock. You might wonder about the little silver patch there. That's for fuel transfer. That's where your propellant-only docking port would go. And so it wouldn't be good for the radiators to be directly on there. So there's a gap with the multi-layer insulation, and I should probably make that look a little bit better. But yes, that is the Spaceplane. I've made many videos with it, and let's take it outside so you can see the cockpit. Oh well, it's definitely not meant for this pad, but let's just go inside. So if you want to use the cockpit, I recommend having raster prop monitor. I should probably have listed that as a requirement. And otherwise, it features switches that don't work, but at least they're labeled. Got the whole throttle quadrant thing here. I haven't finished working on that panel there, but and on the opposite side as well. And they are sort of floating on top of the seats because the seats are meant for humans. But otherwise, it is a pretty legit cockpit, if I do say so myself. And that's included. But frankly speaking, all this business does take up a lot of space. It is a very complicated space plane with a lot of detail in it. So expect that. The zip file is about 200 megabytes. So, yep, it is a serious business, but very capable. And it can land on, as long as you refuel it at the right locations or use ISRU, it can land on the moon, it can land on Mars. I've tested all that, I've shown it in videos, and it can come back to Earth and land as well. Not vertically in that case, of course. It'll need to land horizontally. And maybe it'd be better if you put your own landing gear on. I still don't trust these. I haven't figured out how to configure the landing gear properly. So anyway, I have turned the thrust limit off and everything. That's mainly to make sure I have figured out the balance with the aerospikes. So when you're trying to place the aerospikes, it might be a good idea to turn off the landing engines to make sure that the aerospikes point through the center of mass properly, and you tweak them to the right position for that. And you can use RCS build aid for that, of course, but only if the landing engines are turned to zero thrust. And there's all sorts of quirky things like that to think about. But well, the manual sort of exists, but it's not exactly how to run it in Kerbal Space Program. The manual is meant for in general. So yeah. Well, there it is. The ASCA spaceplane. Still in development, very much so. And I'll continue to work on it and add to the manual and get that ladder thing fixed as well. There's always something. But for now, with that, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do press like. If you have any comments or suggestions, please leave them in the comment section below. And I'll see you next time.